Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast that I almost forgot how to describe. A music
A
podcast for
cavalcade of cohorts converse and contemplate cacophonous contributions.
where a group of
Like
friends gather together
like
to
that.
share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. It's a fun time. I'm PETEY RAVE, and I'm wondering if there's anyone out there. There's some definitely someone in here, virtually in this space. Here with me is my team. I could say a couple of friends of mine.
Look now, we're all around you.
Yeah. We've got David.
I appreciated the poofy shirts.
We've got Matt.
Poofy shirts are quite often well ventilated.
And we've got Brett.
You know, you'd think I'd like have a camera sitting around so I could just like lay on the shutter into the microphone for like a few seconds, but you know, who prepares?
Yeah. I certainly don't have $1,000 camera. Going out to use.
Wait, is this video?
Yep.
No, it's film.
It's film. We're boys on film.
IMAX.
We're here on planet Earth to talk about an album. The provider of the album this week is Brett. Brett, what have you brought for us this week?
Well, I decided that we needed to take a dip into the original version of a song that we saw last week in the chat. So today I brought some very early Duran Duran and their album Duran Duran, the 1981 version.
Yes. Let's talk about expectations. Matt, I'll start with you. What were your expectations coming into this album?
I knew the name Duran Duran, or Duran Duran, as I'm glad to hear other folks say besides me. Hungry Like the Wolf is the only song that I could immediately match up with the music. Like I see the title and I'm like, oh yeah, I know how that goes and who did it. That said, once I looked at the track listing, I kind of went, oh yeah, I recognize a few of these songs. Other than that, I've never really listened to much 80s music. Like most 80s stuff I've listened to started in the 70s. Yeah. And so I kind of always slotted Duran Duran in with that very large bucket, but that's where I put him nonetheless.
David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Very little. In fact, I would say that beyond Hungry Like the Wolf, I've never even considered or heard a Duran Duran song. I know that they are a very successful and very popular group. They just happen to be very successful and very popular on a side of the musical spectrum of which I have absolutely no frame of reference for. They've just never been in my musical periphery at all. I knew I would recognize Simon Le Bon's voice, and that was it. His voice is pretty distinct. I expected something synth-friendly, but more in the atmospheric way, not necessarily in the lead way. And I expected some good, well-written, well-constructed pop songs.
Yeah, I have some experience with Duran Duran. I played Hungry Like a Wolf several times on Rock Band. So there's that. And I've heard a few of their songs more than just Hungry Like a Wolf. I actually recognized a couple songs from this, and there's a few of their hits later that I've had in my brain before. But I wasn't quite sure. I've never sat down and listened to an entire Duran Duran record and to hear what an expanded experience, especially early Duran Duran, which is their debut album. So I was curious, but let's talk about musically. Brett, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, I mean, this is a little bit different than if you know Hungry Like the Wolf or Rio, like they're the album. Like this is before Rio. This is before they did the theme song to everybody's favorite Bond movie that had Christopher Walken in it. You know, they were not very. This album was not successful in the States initially until after Rio came out. You know, it's very much, this is a European focused sound. Like there were not a lot of domestic bands that were making this kind of music.
It's very sprockets.
Mhm.
Very sprockets.
It's personally, I don't have a huge history of Duran Duran other than like, I owned a copy of Rio for some reason, and I knew some songs. Like, I remember the Wesley Willis version of Girls on Film. But yeah, this album is not the big album. But it is very much their style. You get it's early 80s, so you get a lot of the late 70s influences. So you got it's new wave and it's synth wave, but it also has a disco rhythm section. It's also it's got guitars that do things that you wouldn't expect necessarily a pop album to have, because it's not exactly pop. Not all of the songs on this album are radio length for 1981, though this was of the era where they would cut that stuff up and tighten things up. But this is probably one of the first albums that this album, its success came after controversy from MTV. So it's of that era when something like that could happen. It's kind of got that very noticeable nasally vocals. It's got the 80s of synth. It's very synth first, and it is the album that first openly stated the term of new romantic, to sort of put a name on this movement of, they said it out loud, but it had been going on for a while, and there was finally a name for what the hell is a Boy George. It's kind of there's more to it than the novelty.
They're the
and when we
MC
break
Fun a
down
lot of
into
their
tracks, yes.
Matt, how would you describe this album musically?
The thing that first kind of hits you in the face is there's a lot of good overall drum beats, but there were several that I'm going, okay, that's a 16, that's steady 16th notes for the entire song. Okay, there's another. Yep, there's another. Okay. Which is good for it's a good driving beat. Really nice bass lines as well. Like as I started to listen to it more and more, I'm like, there's some little funky stuff in there. Some nice little bit of slap bass and stuff. Something I noticed was the volume balance track to track was not great. There were I'd go to the next song and I'd think, was I listening that quiet in the last song? I turn it up and the next one's blasting, and so they could have done some work with that. And I don't know, maybe they did on the remaster. It is a remaster, so you would hope that they might do some mastering. But it was good. I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you imagine that this would be from the era when they were still mixing for records, where you put the songs with the no bass in the first track and because that used to be a way that they mix things because of the physics of a record. You put the bass on the first track, and they would change, they wouldn't make albums certain ways. I'm curious, because this would have been the end of that.
Yeah.
Right.
The bass stood out on quite a few of the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe it as an album that is a pop album for its time, but has more more rock influence than you might originally believe and might be led on to believe. I do think that I liked the sound of this album sonically because it helped you appreciate the instrumentation that was there. You got to hear them using the stereotypical 80s drum beat sound, the electronic snare, electronic tom sound that became synonymous with the 80s, the quote unquote Phil Collins drum sound of the 80s. I appreciated how well you could hear the bass throughout this album. And I grew an appreciation for Simon Le Bon's voice. I think he is a really talented singer with a very, very pleasing voice as a vocalist. He sounds like someone that has a pretty good vocal range and could probably sing things that you wouldn't expect him to be able to sing. So I really enjoyed him as a singer. I think that he really shined through. I think just as a complete package, everything shined through really well overall. And the songs themselves are pretty damn solid start to finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, music, it's really solid pop, like core album. You know, it has a nice pop core. But yeah, it is the early new romantic stuff. It is the early new romantic sound. Where you're gonna hear is a lot of the early what will plant the seeds of like a lot of this like the synth pop and new wave and things like that would go on throughout the 80s. But you do, like we said, like Brett said, there's carryover from the late 70s, where there are certain elements that are like, because New Romantic is kind of like an answer to punk, but like if you look up on the Wikipedia, according to the Wikipedia, it is a post-punk sound.
You might want to go somewhere else for the album art, though, folks.
Yeah.
If you look at
it wasn't post good punk, I'll tell them that much.
But it is. It is. Do you get that influence? Because you get it. You get influences of some of the mid to late 70s English punk and stuff like that. And we'll get to a specific element that I'll point out in the track segment later on. But yeah, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of the synth influences. There are a couple of songs here that they start off like this is. They start off like the first few seconds of a couple of the tracks are like the almost entirety of like a billion vaporwave songs. Like it's like they listen to the beginning. It's like, all right, let's make a whole song about that. You know, it's like but and you see where things like that came from, which is really cool. But also you just get some fun, catchy songs. Speaking of the tracks, Brett, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on?
Let's start with the opening track, "Girls on Film." This is probably the song off the album that most people would know if they knew a song off of this album. It opens up with hot bass, some synth drums doing the dong thing, and a cowbell. I had to listen.
Is that the 70s influence you were talking about?
Well, I had to listen because there's sometimes where in songs they would use just like a digital drum to play those 16th notes that are on top of everything. And I wondered, is this a synth cowbell? Like, I didn't know if this was a digital cowbell. No, I think it's a real cowbell. I spent way too much time listening to the beginning, and also I spent way too much time trying to figure out whether it was the exact beat. That doom da doom doom was the same was reused for that song "Big Country" by the band Big Country, where dreams scream you from the mountainside or whatever the fuck. But yeah, I really dug the bass on "Girls on Film" and for the whole album. But like, it opens up with it, it's there. It's definitely it's not hidden in the mix. The guitars are like hanging out and like where Shattering Glass lives. The bass guitar had plenty of space in the mix to cut through. Though when it got low, sometimes you were like, "Is that a drum beat or is that a?" Because sometimes the bass was picked, such as on Planet Earth, the song that we visited with the Shatner. This time people hold the notes a little longer when they're singing, but otherwise, it's rhythm section. It's kind of got that feeling of ABBA's "Lay All Your Love on Me" kind of thing going on, but it's a 4/4 disco beat at about 130 beats per minute. So like those 16th notes it's a driving, like it's like a hi-hat being ridden the whole time, but it's modulated, so it's sweeping up and down the whole time, and it's very, very. Yeah, so like, and I also spent way too much time reading the sheet music for Planet Earth. But yeah, I enjoyed there's tons of goodness there. Like it was the alternating picked bass guitar, like kind of doing the downstroke up down, like with it's fun with a little bit of like a walk in there, like just a little bit more bass care than what you would normally expect. Kind of reminded me a lot of how, like, at this time you had people like Sting was playing a bass guitar in a way that did not really fit that kind of music, where you took influences from like reggae and stuff, and like it's not your straight up walking rock and roll. Like this worked for and it's not funk or really like it's not like synth wave band. It's not like your New Orders or your Pet Shop Boys. It's very much a different thing, but also kind of this. It's why it's a very big bucket, like Matthew was telling us all earlier. And the album closes out with a over 5-minute song called Tel Aviv, that is an instrumental. It's almost like a James Bond theme. It's got strings going on. It does some neat synthy things, and then it abruptly kind of stops, and then you're done, and the album's over. It's kind of neat. There's some other songs that you'll hear if you listen to an I Love the 80s station, but like there's some those are the 3 songs that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Girls on Film. This, great opening track. It just kind of really tells you what you're getting into, and I hope you like it, which I fortunately did. Just a nice driving beat. More of those tick 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 tick. Night Boat. This one really threw me for a loop because I was listening to it at one point and I'm like, I recognize this bass line. Where is this from? And it is not perfectly, but it is nearly identical to Jaco Pastorius's, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Okonkole y Trompa. And it's that same harmonic thing. It's slightly different. It's slightly slower, but that gave me a good impression. And I would say the rest of the song followed and did not disappoint. Tel Aviv. There's a flanger. There's no doubt of that. And it's nice that they used real strings. That was a nice little treat that you don't always get, especially in the 80s when everybody, I don't know if they just pretended that synth strings sounded like the real thing or what, but anyway, real strings. It's ballsy, kind of ballsy move to have the last track be an instrumental, and it actually kind of left me wanting more, which was a nice thing to happen.
I think I read that Tel Aviv was written as like their opener, like they would play that before shows started.
Yeah, I just saw that,
which is weird. But you can understand. Oh, it ends. Stop. Lights come on.
Yeah.
Boom. Girls on Film.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that.
Boom.
And I listened to it just a minute ago with the bass is pretty. I mean, it's not super heavy. It's pretty mid-rangey, but it's there. And so it seems like they weren't totally mixing for heavy bass closer to the beginning of each side.
Yeah. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I'm going to break the rules, Petey. I did not much care for Girls on Film. I know it's the rule on to mention the first track, but I didn't much care for that one. Anyone out there? I absolutely loved this one. The bass lead stands out to me on this one. It really stood out, and there were moments where it almost just seemed like they were intentionally just making sure that the bass was prominent and made to be important, and I respected that. And the song itself was a genuinely danceable song. That's okay. Careless Memories. Careless Memories invoked certain emotions. It had an energy, almost an adrenaline to it. And that was a good change of pace from the rest of the album. It almost had kind of anxiety to it, but it was a welcome change of pace. And also, Is There Something I Should Know? I feel like this was the song on the album that was the most defining on the album. When I looked it up and I saw that this was released as a single, I was kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. Because this song, Is There Something I Should Know, is the song on this album that made me say, yeah, if you were to tell me the name Duran Duran and what little I knew about them, listening to that song is exactly what I would expect to hear.
Yeah, that's the song that I remember, like being in a car dealership in the year 2019 and hearing I love the 80s, the iHeart radio station playing that. Yeah. And I didn't know it was on this album.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is, we talked about Girls on Film, we talked about Careless Memories. The song, so in particular, Friends of Mine, but I think From Night Boat to Friends of Mine, those three tracks are the tracks where the first few like seconds start off like every like retro wave, hyperwave, synth waves track lives in for its entirety of the song, which is really cool. You kind of see where that influence is. Particularly Friends of Mine. It starts like that. It also that's where in particular you hear I would say the 70s punk in there in some of the elements, especially how the guitar and like the drum and kind of how the melody is. In particular, it mainly specifically made me think of like the Clash in certain songs from them. So I like that. I dug that, those elements, kind of like seeing how that fed into this and this fed into the things going forward, which is really cool. And yeah, Tel Aviv is just for vibing, man. It's just for vibing. Like, it's just cool.
Just seen that guy's like teased out blonde mullet. He knows how to vibe.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the song is just cool.
Also, hearing you guys say that that's the closer of the track made me realize, when they remastered it for 2010, they added songs. I didn't realize that. I was totally probably going to shout out their Fame cover, which is on the 2010 remaster. And I was like, that one.
You got to be careful for that stuff.
Yeah. These kind of you start dipping into those like Eurocentric albums that we don't have a ton of over here, and they'll remaster and remix. You'll have like the workout session version of these songs. You'll have the.
Luckily, the nine originals were pretty much just better mix and stuff like that, so that worked out. Which is nice. But it definitely was like, wait, it ends with Tel Aviv? Oh. Then I had to look it up on the Wikipedia. Oh yes, it does end with Tel Aviv. Okay. Yeah, those are some really quality tracks. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. Matt, what would be your conclusion at the end of the day?
I really liked this album. It took me several listens for it to kind of sink in and sink its teeth into me, but by the end I had really kind of come around on it. I mean, I didn't dislike it the first time I listened to it, but it was kind of, well, yep, that's 80s, and there's a reason I don't listen to much stuff from the 80s. But through consecutive listens, I liked it more and more. Great driving music, I would assume. I won't know for a while.
Yeah.
But you don't have your Ferrari and like a sunset off into the west and like full on outrun, like gotta get like the total 80s vibe and panning shot and then flock of seagulls
purple sky,
how everyone
purple sky
imagines
with the
Miami.
sun going just over the horizon.
I got a Mazda 3 and we have pretty good sunsets in Texas, so it's not out of the question as long as I'm just turning around and coming back home once
get some purple,
the sun is down.
Get some purple on, drive your fuchsia car.
Yeah.
Nowadays I could probably
get a good quaff, Matt. That's what you need.
Nowadays I could probably replicate that because before the synthwave imagined version of Miami is always hilarious because it's like everybody. I think there's been memes where people put in that image,
sunset and palm trees
and like neon and things like that. What the people imagine Miami to be, and next to it, what it really is, and the image is a bumper to bumper traffic on 985. It's like this is Miami.
Yeah,
and
there's traffic kind of ruins the romanticism of everything.
Also, there's not really any neon. All that stuff is on the beach.
Except maybe sitting sadly in the back of a taxi cab if it's raining.
Most of Miami looks like any suburb.
Isn't like the iconic shot of a sunset, and isn't the water the wrong direction for the sunset?
Mm-hmm. It's a sunrise.
So like it's like the sunrise. You have a party. Yeah, that's
sunrises.
That's when you're going home from the party.
Exactly.
That's when you're getting up and doing
that's when you
Miami Vice lines.
PETEY, how about this?
We have a city called Sunrise, Florida. Not Sunset.
This is when you're carrying your shoes home from the club.
Megan, your jacket.
Polyester.
Megan, your
just
jacket. No.
What? No linen?
Space age fibers.
All right.
Actually, I need to say this on tape. No, I would not want to wear a leisure suit in Miami. Yes, linen it is.
Where were we? Yes. I just finished with Matt. I had to reorient myself.
Yeah.
David, how would you conclude? What would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I didn't dislike it. There are plenty of well-written, well-constructed pop songs by musicians who definitely don't suck. I'm not going to make a comparison here. This is not a comparison. In fact, it is a contrast. It is a complete contrast. While they are maybe genre and time contemporaries, my thought on this album was these guys are the complete polar opposite of what U2 was doing at the time. Like, in terms of musical sensibilities, there may be some similarities, but U2, God love their pretentious asses, were trying to save the world through the power of rock. And Duran Duran was not doing that. They were just... Duran Duran is a great band if you don't really have any worries or cares in the world. And in that regard, they're the complete exact opposite of U2 at the time.
It's like the almost famous quote I like to bring up often about with the drunken buffoons. U2 would be the drunken buffoons posing as poets, where Duran Duran are proud to be drunken buffoons, which makes them poetic.
They're not exactly poetic.
Exactly.
But they're
not,
also
they don't pose as poets, which makes them poetic.
And they're also way better musicians than you two.
Yeah. That's the key. They don't pose as poets.
No.
Which in turn makes them poetic. Which honestly, that's the key. There's an authenticity in the lacking pretense.
Sometimes, and I'm learning that. I have to learn that. Because sometimes pop music for the sake of pop music is okay. And this was okay.
This shelf says it's okay.
PETEY's shelf says it's okay. That's PETEY's shelf.
Exactly. Right there. Look at that. You can recognize the albums. Come hang out. If you can recognize these albums, any of these albums, come hang out with us over at halichuku.com or kpoppodcast.com. We haven't recorded an episode in a while, but we'll be back to it. Which kind of like, things are crazy right now. But if you go ahead and go check out our backlog of episodes, hang out with us over there. Yeah, this album is a fun look at like early new romantic, early new wave, early all that stuff, early Duran Duran in particular. It's a nice to see what it's like was about to start going on, before it really got going, which is really cool. And you can hear what like that transition, because you can hear what came before it and some of the little pieces here and there and touches. But you see where things were about to spawn going forward, which makes it a fun record. Makes it a fun album to listen to, which is nice. But there's not much else to say about that. But let's conclude it. Brett, what would be your conclusion at the end of the day?
I mean, I'm always down to talk about pop music, shooby dooby doo wop, bop bop shoo wop. But it's not ever like my first go-to. This is from a very different time for pop music, and for a world where new genres were popping up. This was fun. This is more than a novelty. It's way more than just like nostalgia, because I wasn't around for this. And there are truly neat things that are being done here. No, it is not deep. And and even if it was, years and years and years, like things that are older than me that are trying to say something sometimes fall flat. After the years and years of, that was their boogeyman. Like the boogeyman has shifted, like less so in this instant. And this is, this was an album that this was their first. Like this is a band that like went to a studio and this was their first complete album, and it's pretty cool. Like that's neat. Even though they made a lot of cheesy stuff and they have really bad haircuts, and like
they were good haircuts at the time.
I don't know about that.
They were fun haircuts
at the time.
I mean, that blonde, like spiked out, poofy with mullet. That it's a great. Everybody's wearing a cummerbund. It's just pleated pants. I'm down. I'm down, and hopefully you are down too.
Let's get down. Get funky. Oh no, let's get down. With some haikus. Some haiku reviews.
Boogie.
Haiku.
Get it out.
Haiku. Let's get down to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. I'm gonna keep driving that bit. Let's get started with Matt. Matt, what is your haiku?
Thoroughly 80s, thoroughly enjoyable. We'll listen again.
Mm-hmm. David, what is your haiku?
Not in my wheelhouse. Carefree, well-written pop rock. It was mostly fun.
my haiku. Debut release of New Romantic Royalty. Radical tunes, dude. And then, Brett, what is your haiku?
The 1980s. A time of giant haircuts. And some guy liner.
Yeah. It was a good recyclable haiku. Kind of like your sizable man with big old sausage fingers. Which we
Our
lost
sausage fingers.
that applied to both CeeLo Green and Dimebag Darrell. And
Red Volkert.
Red Volkert.
Ray Benson.
Yeah. There's quite a few of them.
I mean, yeah.
Those
Sausage
are
fingers? Do they serve them with eggs?
I'd like to think so. With some like eggs over easy with some rice.
All I can think of is peak heavy Yngwie when with his shirt unbuttoned to his navel and his sausage fingers standing in front of an orchestra, going like he's playing with a handful of Jimmy Dean, and it's just going to town.
I like my sausage fingers.
Still got it done.
I mean, yeah, it's like when Homer. It's like, yeah.
I like my sausage fingers and some yellow rice personally. Maybe like cooked it with a good sofrito. Interesting.
As long as you're not one of those Philistines that dips your sausage fingers in syrup, just don't at me on that.
Sausage fingers and yellow rice with some plantanos on the side, maduro fritos. But those are our thoughts. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But those are our thoughts about Duran Duran's debut album, Duran Duran. The first of a couple of self-titled albums. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. Play along at home. Do your homework. Follow along with us. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record, and it will be provided by Matt. Matt, what do you have for us next week?
I will be bringing an album by Vanilla Fudge, and it will be their eponymous debut album, Vanilla Fudge.
Yes, kind of keep the train rolling with some eponymous debut albums. So look forward to that. It's going to be some fun times. But that'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Matt is at MRiddickW. Brett is at HIBBARD, HIBBARD. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. Rebelly.net for listening to other shows. Rebelly TV on YouTube and other places. Like, share, subscribe. You can find us everywhere you find podcasts: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, slap the wall, respect the monkey. Do all the things. Until next time.
Do the romantic.
Hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Rebelly Podcast, baby.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.